I've been thrifting and upcycling for decades, and I've figured out that it's never really about the item itself. It's about knowing what to do with it. So today I'm sharing my top 10 tricks for making cheap thrift store finds look expensive. And I promise by the end of the video, you're going to look at thrifted finds completely differently.
Do you remember this pair of resin candlesticks that I thrifted for $3.99? Their silhouette is the typical top-heavy shape, which instantly makes them feel mass-produced, especially when combined with the busy black and white pattern. So to change up the shape, I cut off the top plate with my Dremel. Then, to give them a softer look, I painted over individual sections with chalk paint in shades of blue, green, and cream to coordinate with two ceramic birds that I had in my stash. The gold bands were the only parts that I didn't paint over. Once the second coat was dry, I brushed a heavy coat of white wax over the entire candlestick and used a cloth to lightly dab away the excess. This really highlighted the damask design on the main section. Then I was ready to glue the ceramic birds to the top. Adding the birds doesn't just decorate the candlesticks, it creates a new silhouette, adding height, movement, and a clear focal point. The ceramic birds had a shiny finish, and the candlesticks had a matte finish. So, to unite them, I sprayed a clear matte top coat over just the birds. Be sure to stick around until the end if you'd like to see side-by-side before and after photos of all of today's projects. Originally, this angel had painted details with gold highlights that were making it look like a cheap figurine. So, to make her look more like an antique sculpture, I purposely broke off her feet. However, I did break off more than I intended. So I just glued it back together with Gorilla Glue, and the cracks will just add to that vintage look. One of the easiest ways to elevate ceramics is to mimic the look of high end materials like plaster or stone. I just completely painted the angel with mineral colored chalk paint, and when the paint was dry, I brushed on a heavy coat of white wax, only lightly dabbing away the excess. Since the angel now has no feet, we need a way to display her that contributes to a high end look. I took a piece of quickwood, which is a two-part epoxy that works on most materials, not just wood. I kneaded the two parts together and pressed it on the end of a dowel rod, and then pushed the dowel rod into the angel as far as it would go. I found this pedestal base in my stash and thought it would be perfect for the angel. I drilled a hole in the center the same size as the dowel rod, filled it with wood glue, and then inserted the rod into the hole. To upgrade the look, I painted the rod dark brown, and when the paint was dry, I applied white wax to the pedestal and to the dowel rod so they would look like a unified structure rather than just a bunch of thrifted items glued together. On its own, this wood box looks cheap, but if we combine it with another thrifted find, we can make it look like an expensive custom piece. The carved lettering on the side wasn't very deep, so it was easy to fill in the letters with wood filler just using my finger. And because I don't want the lid coming off, I glued it in place with wood glue. I let the glue and putty dry for a few hours and then used my orbital sander to sand off the excess putty. I decided to paint it with moss green chalk paint. Using an earthy green instead of white, black, or beige instantly makes a piece feel more designer because mass produced items usually come in safe, neutral colors. I was also going to paint this thrifted urn to match until I saw a tag on the bottom that said solid brass. So instead, I grabbed a cheap metal urn from my stash that was just made to look like bronze. I gave both the box and urn 2 coats of the chalk paint and ever so slightly distressed them. I used extra fine steel wool on the urn. This creates a smooth finish that rub on transfers will readily adhere to. I chose some viney flowers from IOD's Lost Garden transfers. I started with the box and arranged the puttied side to the back. Then I centered the transfer on the front with flowers extending to each side. I really took my time cutting off the excess transparency as I made my way around the box, and I was extra careful going over the edges. I really wanted the urn and pedestal to look like a set, so I applied coordinating transfers to the front of the urn too. To disguise the gap between the box and its lid, I just used some beaded trim from the ribbon section at Dollar Tree. I painted it with the same green chalk paint and then hot glued it over the seam all the way around the box. I also glued some around the bottom of the urn. Then I used a tiny paintbrush and gold rub-and buff to go over each little bead. I tried to highlight some of the edges with a gold paint pen, but unfortunately my pen was just about empty. Finally, to give it a shiny finish, I sprayed both pieces with a clear satin top coat. Right now, it's common for furniture flippers to paint and add transfers to thrift store finds. But if you want your item to truly look high end, lean into the style. The cabriole legs on this cheap table are indicative of the French provincial style. I decided to embrace that style by painting it a light, airy shade of green. The table skirt had a scalloped bottom edge, but you barely noticed it. So I intentionally applied a vintage rose transfer to the table skirt. Because it was such a small area, I was able to use rub on transfers that were left over from another project. Ornate details are also common to this style. So I found a vintage handle in my stash. And to make it look original to the table, I applied a rub on transfer to it too. It didn't perfectly adhere, but that's okay because it looks genuinely aged. Since this is just for looks, I did need to drill 2 holes through the skirt so I could attach it with screws. To dress up the top of the table, I applied 2 small rose rub-on transfers and some French lettering. As a final step, I lightly distressed the paint with a sanding block and I rubbed over the rub-on transfers with extra fine steel wool. Then I brushed on a light coat of antiquing wax, wiping most of it off. I just wanted a hint of age without making the piece look too dark. This large wood sign is actually an oversized frame meant to hold a photo in the center. The first step in transforming this piece is to get rid of the text, which is really dating it. I sanded over the words a bit just so that one coat of black spray paint would fully cover them. After I brought it inside, I painted the recessed center area with gold metallic paint, which breaks up all the black and immediately attracts your eye. You might be expecting me to add one thing to that center black box, like a picture, but high-end design often avoids predictable symmetry. So I decided to add some thrifted metal butterflies that will look like they are flying across the frame. I touched up the edges with a little gold ribbon buff so the butterflies would pop against the black frame. Then I attached them with just two small screws that I painted black to make them less noticeable. The black background creates a calm, modern base, while the gold inset adds a metallic accent, and the butterflies add movement and softness. And it's that combination that makes this piece look high end. This giraffe picture is probably the ugliest item I thrifted for today's video. So let's take a hammer to it. For safety reasons, I really should have covered that glass, but I thought it was plexiglass. I removed the glass, the giraffe, and as much of the decorative paper as I could. To make the wood frame darker and to disguise several scratches, I brushed on a very light coat of brown acrylic paint. Then I wiped most of it off with a paper towel so that you could still see the wood grain. When the paint was dry, I brushed on some dark wax to add some color depth and to protect the paint. The only reason I purchased this frame was because of the deep picture box, and I decided to fill that box with a thin layer of styrofoam. One of the easiest ways to make something look high end is to add natural elements like wood, moss, or stone. And that is my plan for this frame. First, I added a few realistic looking faux succulents. Then I completely covered the styrofoam with moss. I hunted through my florals and greenery and found a few other dried and faux elements that I hot glued to the moss. At this point, it looks so much better, but to give it a truly custom touch, I added something unexpected, a tiny blue frog. The natural colors and textures feel organic and layered, and the frame makes it read like art. But it's the tiny frog that adds that unexpected moment that makes this piece feel truly personal and unique. This CD cabinet is a nice wood storage box, but many people probably passed it by at the thrift store because of the fishing themed decor on the front. But the fastest way to improve this piece is to remove the resin miniatures that are making it look cheap. And luckily, I was able to easily pry it off. I also pried off the little plaque that said CD chest. By removing the themed items, it feels less like a novelty piece now and more like high-end decor. But it does seem a bit bland, so I decided to add a little interest by applying peel and stick wallpaper to the back wall. I just used a small piece left over from a bathroom makeover. The little plaque left nail holes in the door, so I filled them with some wood filler, and after it dried, I sanded it smooth. To disguise that repair and to add some contrast to the cabinet, I painted just the door black. This also echoes the mostly black wallpaper, so it really feels intentional. Then I sealed the chalk paint with some dark antiquing wax, and I added 2 D-rings to the back so that I would have the option of hanging this on the wall. I love a glass and brass container, and this Pentagon trinket box seemed really special. But I thought it would look more high end if I attached it to something like a candlestick. Even simple items look more expensive when they're lifted and displayed. So, first, I used my Dremel to cut off the little metal feet. Then I hunted through my stash and found this glass and brass candlestick that I thought was a good size. I tried polishing the brass portions, but I don't think it helped much, which makes me think that the base may not actually be brass. I used extra strength Gorilla Glue to attach the candlestick to the bottom of the trinket case. Then I weighted it down with a rock and let it dry for several hours. The previous owner used it to display a corsage, but I wanted to create a little terrarium. So I filled the case with moss, dried mushrooms, and some tiny faux flowers. Then, to create an unexpected statement piece, I bought a metal butterfly hook from Dollar Tree. I only wanted to use the top wings with the cutout design, so I used my Dremel to cut off the back solid wings and to cut off the hook. Then, to keep it propped up, I hot glued the butterfly's body to a stick and placed that inside the case. I have no idea what this box was originally used for, but it looked unique and well made. The more unique a piece is, the more expensive it looks. Because if it's something people haven't seen before, it automatically feels special. So we just need to give it a purpose. And for some reason, its shape reminded me of a bookend. I decorated both the front and back sides with botanical rub on transfers. That way you can turn it in either direction. Then I added some faux greenery to the box, but later I switched out the greenery for some faux flowers instead. I also wanted to add something to the smaller piece that sticks out on the side. And of course, I was thinking that that something should be a bird. To create a platform for the bird, I placed a small wood block into the hole in the center. And because I wanted this to be two-sided, I wanted the bird to rotate. To accomplish this, I drilled a hole in the bottom of the wood bird and attached a small dowel rod. Then I drilled a hole in the wood block and pushed in the opposite end of the dowel rod. As a final touch, I decided to distress the transfers with some steel wool to make the piece look more vintage. Although I think this makes a really interesting bookend, I would still like to know what its original purpose was. So if anybody knows, please drop me a comment. These were just about the most uninteresting bookends I've ever seen, but I thought they'd be perfect to use with something that I've had in my stash for years. This horse was the piece I wanted to use. I've had it for so long that I don't remember where it came from or what it cost, but I'm sure I didn't pay more than $1 or $2 for it. I was actually shocked when I cut it in half and discovered that it was solid wood. Had I known that, I probably wouldn't have done it. But there's no going back, so I attached each half of the horse to the bookend with wood glue and a brad nail. I hope you enjoyed today's tips for making your thrift flips look expensive. And here's another video you may find helpful if you're trying to dupe the look of high-end antiques. Thanks so much for watching today. Hope to see you next week.